Well, Germany and the United States yesterday announced plans to send tanks to Ukraine. The United States with Abrams tanks, Germany with Leopard 2 tanks, Poland also announcing it's sending Leopard tanks to Ukraine yesterday. And this morning, we learned that Portugal announced it's sending tanks to Ukraine, a country that I didn't even know had any tanks. Russia says that Europe is now expanding the target for this war, and Russia will see these as potential targets going forward. Have we just escalated things beyond where they were before? Scott Ritter is a former UN weapons inspector. He knows a thing or two about weapons and their implications, and he joins us on the show. Scott, great to have you back.
Thanks for having me.
So last week on the show, you said something that I thought was incredibly important, and I've been thinking about it all week, which is the more weapons we send to Ukraine, the more weapons NATO sends to Ukraine, the weaker it makes Ukraine, both in terms of manpower and, of course, opening it up for further attack. You see this amplification, these additional tanks that are being sent as vindication of your message, or is now Ukraine suddenly going to win this war?
Well, Ukraine's not going to win this war. They're definitely not going to win it with 14 Leopard 2 tanks, A6 variants that Germany claims it's going to provide by the end of March, early April. 14 more Leopard A2 tanks that Poland's going to provide. Between 30 and 50 Abrams tanks, which aren't going to show up on the battlefield till the end of this year or early next year, or any other tanks that are going to be provided. The fact of the matter is, these tanks aren't game changers. The Ukrainians have been trained to fight in Soviet-era tanks, T-72s, and their own T-64 updates, three-person crews. They're inheriting tanks right now, or they're going to receive tanks that have four-person crews. Why? Because you have to manually load these tanks. So automatically, the whole concept of putting a crew in a tank and employing the tank is fundamentally changed. And if you haven't trained on this, if you haven't practiced on it, you're just getting into a system. It's like, if I brought you a Formula One car and you've never trained on high-speed driving, and I said, Clayton, take her for a spin.
Right.
You would be like a little old grandma. And they're, you have no clue what you're doing. You don't know how to handle this piece of machinery. That's going to be the Ukrainians with this equipment. It takes 22 weeks to train an M1 Abrams crew member. I would imagine that the Leopard 2 tank is equally as complex a piece of equipment. And so Germany is going to provide 14 of these tanks in, 10 weeks' time? So even if the Ukrainians were getting training right now, when they receive the tanks, they're not going to be trained on it, let alone know how to what to do with 14 tanks. If anybody thinks 14 tanks is a game changer, you have no clue what modern war is. These 14 tanks will be chewed up if they ever arrive on the battlefield. But the likelihood of all 14 arriving is slim to none because of the maintenance problems of these tanks. This is one of the things we talked about previously about the different infantry fighting vehicles that were being provided and the maintenance nightmare they presented. For the M1 Abrams tank, under ideal circumstances, for every hour of operation, you need 3 hours of maintenance. And that's with American crews that are actually trained, dedicated military occupation specialties of guys who go through the schools, they know how to do this, and they have the entire system backing them up. In the United States system, we'll have a tank company up front, and behind it is this huge system ready to back it up. With the Ukrainians, we're going to put an M1 Abrams tank company out front, and then there's going to be this thin little umbilical cord that goes back because there will be no direct support. If the tank breaks, it has to be removed from the battlefield, taken back to a place where it can be repaired. It's going to be very difficult for this tank to appear on the battlefield because the Russians right now are a little irritated, and they're going to put everything they have into interdicting these weapons before they get to the battlefield. But let's say they get to the battlefield and they break. That just means they have to run the gauntlet one more time to get fixed and then run the gauntlet again to come back. Every time you do that, you're setting up Ukrainians to die. And this is all that's going to happen. These weapons will have no meaningful impact. Just a news flash for NATO and all the NAFO fellas out there that are sort of cheerleading right now that this is a great thing. For the last 20 years, NATO and the United States have been focused singularly on Afghanistan and the Middle East. The last thing they've been doing is preparing for large-scale ground combat in Europe. The Russians have been preparing for large-scale ground combat in Europe since 2008. In 2016, they fundamentally reworked their organizational structures, and they're continuing to update them today for the sole purpose of closing with and destroying a NATO-style army. That doesn't just mean how NATO fights doctrinally, but the equipment. Every piece of Russian equipment that's in the Russian inventory today has been designed and is intended to kill NATO tanks. So if people think that the Leopard 2 showing up on the battlefield is suddenly going to scare the Russians, you're wrong. They're ready for it, they've trained for it, and they have the equipment to deal death and destruction. And for the Germans, I just don't know what's going through their brains.
Yeah.
The idea of putting German tanks on Ukrainian soil for the purpose of killing Russians. Man, that didn't work out too good the last time they did it, and it's not going to work out too good this time.
Yeah, it seems like instead of going the opposite direction and moving towards peace, we're doubling down on this. Now, Russia, of course, amplifying its rhetoric over the past 24 hours and saying, this is an extension now of the targets, right? You're now opening up the targets. This isn't just the Ukrainian battlefield now. This gives, I mean, you can speak to that a little bit, what you're hearing from Russia now, that you're sort of expanding the battlefield beyond just Ukraine. We're now actively looking at, you have Portugal announcing these tanks are going to be delivered through Spain. They're actively telling us how on rail lines they're going to be delivering these tanks through Spain. So they're going to be coming from Poland and all of these different locations. What do you make of that side from the Russian side of this now?
Well, first of all, we have to understand that the Ukrainian defense minister last month just straight out said that Ukraine is a de facto member of NATO. That the Ukrainian army is a proxy NATO force, and that Ukraine's willing to sacrifice its blood, but it must receive the equipment from NATO in order to carry out these tasks. So by his own definition, which then was, you could say, well, that's just an irresponsible, over-enthusiastic Ukrainian official. Then you back it up with the meeting of the Ramstein contact group on January 20th, where all of the defense ministers of NATO and other nations who aren't NATO, like Sweden and Finland and such, got together and, without exception, articulated a similar, theory of their involvement, that this is about a NATO war with Russia. The German foreign minister just said it straight up to her European colleagues. Germany is at war with Russia. Let's be clear. Russia has every legal right to attack any place in Europe that is involved in the transfer of these weapons to Ukraine. By agreeing to transfer these weapons to Ukraine, every nation that has said, yes, this is what we're going to do, has become an active participant in the conflict. And under the laws of war, Russia can take them out. Now, here's the good news. Russia is simply putting a marker down and saying, you've just increased our target deck. We can do this. But Russia has been managing escalation from the very beginning. And the last thing Russia wants is to turn this into a not just a de facto, but a de jure conflict between NATO and Russia, because now it's nuclear war and it's over. So I don't see, at least in this iteration, Russia reaching out and touching Polish logistics centers, German railheads, Spanish tunnels. I don't see that happening because Russia doesn't need to do that. Russia's winning this war, hands down, and Russia's going to win this war, hands down. But Russia is letting NATO know that if by some strange set of occurrences, all this equipment showed up in Ukraine, and the Ukrainians were able to assemble a mailed fist that threatened Crimea or anything else, that it's game, set, over. I mean, Russia will open up and unleash everything they have on NATO because NATO is an active participant in this conflict. And again, if you take a look at Russian nuclear doctrine, one of the conditions for the use of nuclear weapons is if NATO or a NATO-like entity assembles sufficient conventional military power that threatens the existential survival of Russia. So what NATO is seeking to do, they're not going to accomplish it, but what they're seeking to do is give Ukraine the ability to act as a NATO proxy to threaten the existential survival of Russia, which means Russia, if this actually occurred, would use nuclear weapons, not on Ukraine. They've said it straight up. This isn't going to be a tactical nuclear weapon against Ukraine. They're going to hit NATO. They're going to hit London. They're going to hit Berlin. They're going to hit Paris. They're going to hit Brussels. They're going to hit Madrid. They're going to hit Lisbon. Hey, Portugal, good job. You just made yourself a nuclear target. This is the reality. Now, the good news is Russia's winning this war, and they're going to win this war. Russia's ready for this. They're prepared for this. But politically, this is an escalation. And imagine, put yourself in Russia's shoes. What NATO is saying is they want to kill Russians. They want to kill Russians. This isn't some mathematical game with tanks and steel and all this kind of stuff. It's not a computer game. This is reality. Now, I've said that what all they're doing is actually enabling Russia to slaughter more Ukrainians. That's the truth. But let's say that, because the blade of war cuts both ways. That's just the harsh reality of it. That the same blade you'd use to kill somebody is cutting you. And let's say Russia gets away with a 10-to-1 casualty ratio. That's a fantastic ratio, almost impossible to achieve, but they're doing that now. But let's say the new tanks come in and Russia sustains this, and they kill 40,000 Ukrainian troops, which is what's going to happen. Russia's going to lose 4,000 dead. That's 4,000 mothers, 4,000 wives, 4,000 daughters, 4,000 sisters, 4,000 grandmothers and uncles and brothers and sons that are going to lose loved ones. This is unforgivable, literally unforgivable. And remember, this isn't a war that was provoked. It's not an unprovoked act of aggression by Russia. This is something that has been planned by NATO since 2008 when they invited Ukraine to join, something that has been perpetrated by NATO since 2014 when Angela Merkel and Hollande, the French president, conspired with Petro Poroshenko, the Ukrainian president, to use the Minsk Accords as a shield to buy time to build up this NATO proxy army for the purpose of killing Russians. This has been going on since the spring of 2022. We now have the Ukrainian head of intelligence saying the peace agreement that Russia was sitting down in Istanbul to sign with Ukraine that Boris Johnson killed, it was a sham too. It was never going to happen. It was designed to buy time to do what? To kill Russians. To kill Russians. That's right. All this is about. And Lloyd Austin has admitted that when he came out in May of last year and he spoke in Warsaw and he said, we need to bring pain to Russia. Well, pain is a cute little word. It means death. It means dead Russians. It means suffering. And for NATO, the United States, Germany, Portugal, and all others to act on this desire can only generate hate on the part of the Russians. And Europe better pray that the Russians turn out to be a forgiving nation, because what Europe is doing right now is unforgivable.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. Scott Ritter, former UN weapons inspector, whose words have been incredibly poignant over the past couple of weeks. We really appreciate you joining us. Thank you for your analysis and insight. And hopefully cooler heads will prevail in Europe. Otherwise, they're going to get us all killed at the end of the day. Scott, great to see you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
As Neil in our chat just says, absolute scumbags. Yeah, they are. Absolute. And they're controlling the battlefield right now. They control the future. Lockheed Martin just yesterday saying it's ready with their F-16s, and now Ukraine is saying we want F-16s. Who's going to man that? You can just hop into an F-16. These guys who have never flown an aircraft. I mean, these people are delusional.
They can just watch Top Gun a couple times and they're good to go. Right?
They're good to go.
It's all right there.
Play Afterburner on Sega Genesis, and you're good to go.
Or watch that presentation that I can't remember if it was MSNBC where they did the war games. Watch that.
Yeah, you'll be good to go. Yeah, it was Meet the Press. Yeah, it was Meet the Press. Play a Microsoft Flight Simulator. Yeah, you'll be good to go. How does this end at this point? Does this end with? I'll just ask all of you. Do you think that NATO and NATO countries, after all of these sanctions, all of the weapons, all of the money, all of the corruption that they've poured into Ukraine, they're just going to stop, say, okay, we're done. Okay, Donbass is now under full Russian control. We're just going to stop. We're going to stop lobbing missiles. We're going to stop with the F-16s. We're going to stop with the tanks. We're done. We're just going to go home now. I mean, you have the protests all over Paris, all over Germany. There's a big anti-war rally in the United States. So maybe the people will move the world to get them out of there. But I don't know how this ends. I mean, it either ends with NATO saying we're done, we're going home, we're picking up our ball and going home, or it ends with Russia cleaning the floor with NATO. What's the middle ground here?
I don't see the U.S. getting out of it as long as we can continually make the money back that we're giving to Ukraine by selling them our weapons.
Oh, it's been great.
As long as that's going on.
It's been great for the United States. It's been great for the not the United States people. It's been great for the military-industrial complex. It's been great for natural gas providers, right? So now we're able to sell natural gas to Germany after we blow up their pipeline at 4 times the cost of what they were paying for it before the pipeline was blown up. This is brilliant.
Well, and the fact that there's zero accountability, there's nothing telling us where or who this money is going to. I guarantee there's some personal pocket padding going on as well. It's not just military industrial complex. Like these people that are pushing it, they're paid advertisers. So why are you pushing it so hard? Because you're getting something out of it.
Well, and a source told me something very fascinating today about an individual in Ukraine. I won't name names because this was an off-the-record conversation, but very interesting because the person who happens to be in the United States but is also travels to Ukraine on a regular basis gets to live lavishly, basically. And is just getting $1 million checks deposited in their account. Where does that money come from? Oh, just use your imagination where that money comes from. And the palatial palace that you get to live in Ukraine that has a pool with your nice cars. Where's that money coming from? Yeah, you know where it's coming from. Unbelievable. So what's next? Someone says, Welsh22, thank you for your super chat. Welsh32 and on YouTube says, what's next? NATO sending Ukraine Apache helicopters? Who knows? Well, we're just cleaning out whatever we have at this point. But Lockheed Martin's like, hey, we're ready. You want F-16s, Zelensky? We got them. I don't care if they blow up the moment we send them, as long as you're paying for them. The moment they arrive, they will be destroyed. Just like any of these tanks that arrive in Ukraine will be destroyed. They're going to be rubble. They're going to be molten lava in a few minutes after they arrive there. Why are we wasting our time, money, and more importantly, human lives with all of this? It's really disgusting. It's really disgusting. Thank you so much for watching this segment here at Redacted. We are live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, trying to share the stories that the mainstream media will not cover. You should also come over and join our community of Redacted Rebels over at redacted.inc. That's our private locals community where we can share exclusive content that we simply cannot share here on YouTube. Come over and join the rebellion together right now by going to redacted.inc. We'll see you next time.